I'm just pushing. Okay, now we're live. Sorry. Go ahead.
We good?
Yep.
Okay. District 1.
That's Stribling.
District 2.
Connor Kinman.
Welcome, Connor. We're glad to have you. District 3.
Grant Jones.
4.
Brian Ellis.
District 5. Patrick's not here yet. District 6.
Austin Brawley.
District 7.
Michael Stone.
District 8.
Jenny Hipple.
District 9.
Pauletta Smith.
10.
Curtis Irvin.
11.
Jason Bowles.
12.
Mike Arthur.
All right. Everybody's here except Patrick. All right. Do we have, you've had a chance to look at the agenda for today. There's not a whole lot on it. Do we have a motion to approve today's agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Curtis, and then who was second? Michael, was that you?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, I think the way we do this is unless there's any opposed, we'll assume that it passes. So any opposed? Okay. And the agenda is approved. Item 3 on the agenda is approval of the minutes from July 11th. In talking with Dr. Strobe, we still do not have a hard copy, I believe, on the minutes. John, can you expound on that just a little bit?
Both of those are are linked. I know I finished them up. I didn't.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, they're both linked from the agenda that's online.
Okay.
I think. Yeah, it should be. Yeah. I finished that up this morning. So there's the minutes from July 11, which is lengthy and convoluted, to characterize it. And the one from July 15, which is considerably shorter and somewhat more straightforward. But those were the 2 meetings. We did on the 15th, we just didn't go back and do minutes for 4 days before.
I see. Gotcha. Okay, it looks like Patrick has joined us now. We're done, Patrick, so you can go home now.
Good.
All right. So if you've had a chance to look over the minutes from the last meetings, do we have a motion to approve those?
I don't know if they've really had a chance, honestly, to be, because I just got them in there last night. Sorry.
That's all right. And I'll be honest with you, I went back and looked at them online, but I didn't look them in your link there. So is there a motion to accept the minutes?
Yeah, so moved.
Second.
Brian Ellis. And who was second?
Grant.
Grant Jones, second. Any opposition? Hearing none, we'll approve the minutes from our last meeting. Okay. So for my report, I'll be very brief with the cancellation of the site-based council meeting. No, it wasn't canceled. We still had the site-based council meeting. I have SMBC written in my notes, and so it's in that brain. Sorry about that. The State Marching Band Championship. Since it was canceled, some bands, as you know, were still able to have some semblance of a marching season, if you will. Some competed, some played marched at football games, some just played in the stands, and some did not march at all. and I could be wrong, but by my estimation, in Kentucky, I believe there were 4 marching events that were scheduled. And if there are more, I'd like for you to let me know, but I know of 4 for sure that were slated anyway for the season. And 3 of those were actually able to happen. The 4th one was canceled because of a COVID spike and the red zone restrictions that were put on the host and also a lot of the participants in that particular contest. And that was October 31st, which coincidentally was the date that we had chosen for our state championships. Now these marching events did, they used different formats because they weren't sanctioned. There were some that had in person as well as virtual opportunities for bands to participate. And because they weren't sanctioned, they were able to, they had no rules as far as number of judges. I know I judged the contest at Pulaski County, just had 4 judges. Pauletta was there with me. Other contests had full complement of the usual 6 judges. Many did not have judges down on the field. However, there were opportunities occasionally for clinics to happen after a band performed. Bands were allowed to talk with the judges in person and get a firsthand, very quick summary of some ideas for improvement right after the performance, which proved to be pretty beneficial, I think, to some of the bands that did perform. I'm estimating that between 15 and 20 bands probably were able to have some semblance of a marching season in Kentucky anyway. And based on the comments from the survey that was sent out, I think those that were able to participate were thankful for the opportunity to perform, to receive feedback, and to have something to look forward and to work for as well. So as you glance at the agenda for today, you'll see that there really are no action items that I know of. Much of the meeting will be discussion about just what our next steps should be in preparation for 2021. So that concludes my report. John, I'll turn it over to you for your report.
Sure, not much. Of course, we've seen that those several bands were able to do that, and I'm really pleased. And of course, there's any number of other bands who were able to have a pretty rigorous football band season and give the kids a chance to perform in front of the people that care about them the most. I can still remember toward the end of October, somebody emailing me and saying, well, tonight's our last football event. I'll have a little more time next week to deal with your question, that sort of thing. And they were doing what they could. And I think that all of that is good. As was mentioned in a summer meeting, the marching arts is not tied, not married to being judged and assessed and scored and ranked and rated. It's performing. You don't do that with your spring musical. You don't do that with your holiday concert. That they're performances for people that care about you. So of course people went ahead and did what they could. If they were able to put something together they wanted to take and get assessed, they did. And if they were able to, and if it fell short of that and that wasn't in the cards, they did the other. And we don't know how many bands did that. We don't have a number on that, but I'm sure they all did what they could. Some schools said, we're not going to allow the band in the stadium because we already can't sell very many tickets and we need those seats because we're losing money hand over fist on this football thing. Others said, oh, we're reserving a section for the band, please be there. So, it just varied from place to place. And it was a weird fall. We don't know what next year will be. Tim mentioned that about the bands, of course, that were able to have a competition. And during the summit, after this meeting comes to a close, Scott Sexton should be here. He would like to talk to us about, to explain the plan that they crafted, which is very good. Scott, you know, is a very organized individual. And the plan they crafted and got it passed by the Pulaski County Health Department, and then Kip Crowder borrowed that plan and used it with the in Barron County. And they had events that were gratifying. And as somebody said, therapeutic. Scott said that. This having the marching activity for his band was therapeutic. And who can disagree? So we don't know what next year will bring. We hope it'll be better. It shows signs of turning. Of course, our numbers are climbing, as the governor said, exponentially right now, and we have to get past all that, get these vaccines into place and forms of treatment, and get the numbers down. You know, whatever works, get the numbers down, and that's what we'll want to talk about. We don't know. We will aim for the last Saturday of October as a date for the championship, if we're able to have it. And as soon as football schedules come out, we'll try to nail something down. But of course, this year, I'm afraid they'll probably say, you know, this schedule could change, because it sure changed last year. For example, the University of Kentucky had a ball game at home on the 31st this year. They didn't originally, and we were going to be there. But had we been able to persist, we would have gotten to a point and they would have said, "Oh, sorry, we've got something else going on." So, you know, we'll aim for that, and we'll try to find what venues are available and work backward from there and see how things go. And I know that's really pretty much what Tim wants to talk about in the new business. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, John. We really have, to my knowledge, we have no unfinished business. And so we'll move on to new business. And as I mentioned before, the bulk of what we talk about today will be how do we proceed as we prepare for this next year. So I just put some bullets down that a lot of those bullets right there came from suggestions from the survey that was sent out. Some of them are big, broad questions, and others are a little bit more specific. And they're all pretty much tied together. So we may take them in a different order that's written here. But, you know, as John said, I think if we ask ourselves, how do we proceed right now? I think we need to have two plans. I think we need to have a plan that proceeds as normal. And you notice I have quotes around the word normal. But as John said, try to secure sites, try to secure a date. Ultimately, what's going to, and I think we all know this, ultimately what's going to decide whether we're able to have anything similar to what we normally have is going to be totally dependent on the availability of transportation for students. And then if there's going to be any money that's made, any profit incurred, it's going to be because there are spectators in the stands. So those are, in my mind, those are two big items that, regardless of the plans that we make, those two things have to happen. We have to be able to get students to sites, and we have to have, if we're going to make money, if it's going to be profitable, we have to have spectators in the stands. And that was our obstacle that we had to deal with this fall. So before the pandemic hit, as you may recall, we were in the midst of a big format change where we had the 6-and-6 format, where we had regional quarterfinals with 6 bands taken from each one, and then they went on the next week to the top 12 in their class, and it was narrowed down to finals that evening. So we never did get to see that come to fruition, and so that is still in the works unless something changes. So in my mind, we do need to proceed as if it were going to be a normal marching season. And then we probably need to think about, do we want to have a plan B? And if we do, what steps that might involve. So I'll, a couple of items that came up in the survey. And again, this is totally open discussion. There are no motion items, no action items, I should say, that require motions today. So it's totally up for discussion. And I'm really interested to see what ideas and thoughts that the committee might have. One of the items that was mentioned a couple times in the comments of the survey was the idea of that so many of our bands, your bands, are being affected, our bands too, mine as well, are being affected numbers wise. Our numbers are going to take a hit. I don't know of anybody I've talked to that said, oh, we're growing this year. It's hitting us all. And so it was brought up in a couple of comments about the idea, do we want to possibly modify our classification as to how bands are classified? Now, there's a number of avenues we could take, but if indeed, and it would probably involve definitely another survey and maybe a task force, but if our numbers, even if some of the 5A bands numbers are down to 80 musicians and less, that's a cut. That's a different set of numbers that we're dealing with there. So I definitely feel like there's going to be some numbers involved here, changes in classifications. That could be pretty complex if we base it on our hybrid system right now. And it's something that we need to consider. So I just want to mention that. I'm going to throw it out there, and I hope you have some ideas that you might like to share. So I'll open up the floor for discussion right now.
I will be really curious to hear how people are thinking about that. And I just wanted to say real quickly, of course, just to recall the thing that we've done twice, it's an average of the past 2 years of school size, and then the reported band size. And that is all those bands then are given points, just recall, and it's divided into 5 classes. And by the virtue of the way the formula works, 5A is about half the size of the other 4 classes, because you have to have a perfect 10 to be 5A. And I think one of the concerns was that the numbers might all crunch toward the middle. Well, they kind of are anyway. I'm not sure if they'll do that or if they'll just all slide down to smaller. And we don't know what those numbers would be for next year, but that's all I wanted to say.
Anybody have some input?
I know from a lot of people that were able to continue and move forward, it seems like that just about everybody I talked to was operating with about 65, maybe 70% of what they normally would have. And, I think the model of basing it off school size with band size, everybody is crunching towards a similar amount in terms of band size, which in my opinion gives the school size more weight. And if we're going to give the school size more weight, in some ways, my opinion would be just to go with school size until numbers get back up. Just throwing that out.
I'm not sure, Curtis, why this gives school size more weight. Maybe you can explain. I just don't quite grasp it. In that, the band size, if they all shrink, then 1A, the largest band in 1A, instead of being, I don't know how big it was, 45, might be 35, and all the bands would be proportionally smaller. And the 2A would then be, well, depending on school size, but it seems like they both are given equal weight in the formula, the band size and the school size, if I have my mind around it properly.
I guess in my head, I'm thinking that if every band is a similar size, then the only thing that's delineating which class you would be in would be the school size component of that. So in my mind, I'm just thinking that the band size thing would kind of cancel each other out. That if everybody's got the same number on the band size, then the thing that's going to determine who goes where would be the school size at that point.
But if you have an exceptionally small band or an exceptionally large band by comparison with everybody else, then that would move you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Otherwise, for all the bands that are about exactly 75 people out there, the school size would be the determining factor, since they're playing with an equal number of players. I'm not sure. I think the formula takes that into account, and that just lets school size be the thing that matters, since band size doesn't matter for those bands. It already kind of happens around the 3 and 4A area. A lot of those bands are real similar in size, you know.
I agree with Curtis, just because I really do think, just looking at things and talking to people throughout the what we would regularly call a season, I guess we just call it fall for this year. I really think that, most of the bands that we see in like the larger part of 2A through 4A and even some of 5A are going to be the same size, probably around that like 60 to 90 mark if we get lucky. And then I think that the only, like, kind of like what you said, Dr. Strobe, the only bands that I think are going to be affected by the band size component are the bands in Class A and the big 3 and 5A. I think that pretty much the rest of us are going to be kind of locked in the same place. And it's going to be really hard to determine how to break up classes or anything like that, just based with the band size component in there, just because we're all going to be the exact same every year.
I'd like to chime in, not to be on the other side of things, but as a director that is on that 3 and 2A edge, my numbers have significantly dropped. And so when we're looking at this situation, our school enrollment has actually gotten bigger, but because of things with, in our district, middle school kids aren't staying because they're not getting the same help. I've got lots of kids. I think normally, especially in our district with the percussionist band director at the middle school, we normally have 6, 7, 8 percussionists, and now I have 2. And so I think that the school size is going to be the constant here for many programs, but the actual ensemble sizes are the things that are going to be big changers. I think, at least what I'm hearing from District 8, is that our enrollment school-wise isn't really changing, but the amount of kids that we actually have staying in our band program is significantly dropping, just because of things that are out of our control.
I have to agree with Jenny to a point. I'm seeing both sides of this, but it seems to me that the constant, and I think Curtis might have used the wrong word when he said puts more weight on it. I think that the school size has more of an impact on the deciding factor, but I think it's interesting that Jenny said her school size is growing in all of this. I don't think that's a norm in District 1, but I think that having both go into play is really important, because although the size factor for so many bands is changing, we're there too, and in watching the middle school numbers go down, knowing that we're going to have this bubble of smaller bands for several years, having that differentiating factor of the school size is what's going to make the difference. But I think we need both, because that's what impacts the band. And if we remember, one of the reasons way back in the day that we went to school size was because the size of the school often meant that bands had more of an ability to have more cash, have more financial benefit because of that that school size. And that could still be there even with the budget cuts. So that's my 2 cents.
Anybody else?
I see both sides of all this, and I think it's a conundrum either way you go. But I do, you know, when all this first started, you know, I was experiencing enrollment issues and whatnot with my program. And I remember thinking, you know, it's going to take 3 to 5 years for everybody to recover from this. And the more this has went on, I'm now starting to feel like we're going to be faced with this issue maybe for 5 to 10 years before things kind of, God willing that we get this under control, vaccine, the numbers go down, and we're kind of able to get back to somewhat normalcy sooner than later. I think we're going to be struggling with the classification hurdle here for the foreseeable future before things kind of levy out. That bubble that's going to be created in that middle before it kind of disperses back out and it's more even. So I do think this is something we got to figure out.
I think it'd be useful to see some data on this as well, what we could possibly get. I know that's pretty tough at this point, but even just not even a 1 year change, a 9-month change. What were I guess a 1 year change. What were your numbers last year? What are your numbers this year? What are your numbers predicted for next year? Looking at those 3 numbers to see where that number is going. Did it dip? Is it going to come back up? Curtis, I really think this is a 10-year recovery period for the performing arts, instrumental music in particular. If you follow the 6th grade bands that were started this year, many of them that did not get to get started, some programs that were just completely halted. Mine was almost halted, came back half the numbers of normal. And then follow that 6th grade group through 12th grade and then into college. We're looking at a 10-year recovery cycle. I think another thing to be cautious of, aware of, and concerned about, and we need to be working in our local districts, is the recovery of core classes, what's called core classes, math, English, science, and so on. As districts look to put things back together for next year, there's a strong possibility that, hey, Ava can't be in band this year because she's got to double up on her math because, we're behind on that math or something like that. So that's another piece of the puzzle. But kind of back to my first statement is I think it'd be wise to get a little bit of data on this to see where we're going, to start formulating a plan that's going to be something that's going to be with us for a while. I don't think this is going to be a 1-year fix to see how to organize bands into those classes. And I think at this point, I don't think that we should overlook anything, any possibility. 5 classes, 4 classes. I know that's a really big one to throw out there. Do we need 5 classes? Do we need 4 classes? Do we need 6 classes? Do we need 10 classes? Okay, I'm getting crazy here, but I think there's a lot of things to look at. How would it look based on the numbers that we would get in just from a quick survey? How would it look if we divided up in the current situation? Let's just look at that. How would it look? Where would bands fall? Where would they fall if it was a 5-class system? Where would they fall if it was a 4-class system? Where would they fall if it was band size only? Where would they fall if it was school size only? Where would it fall in the hybrid? I think that would be very useful information to look at before big decisions are made. But this is going to take everybody. This is the biggest thing we'll ever face in our careers at this point, really.
Yeah, I think David brings up some good points. And for me, like, I would like to be able to talk about this in a logical way, but I don't have the information to talk about it. There's so much, I'm sitting here racking my brain and thinking about the bands in my district, and I just don't I don't know the answer. I know Beth brought up school size, and having been part of one of those bands, it was a smaller band and a large school. I mean, I know that that was the case back in the day where we had more money, but I kind of wonder in today's time, especially with all this, is that really going to be a factor? I would say that most of us, I know definitely me, we used a whole lot less money this year because of our circumstance, and we spent a lot of time trying to take care of the bills that we had, and got ourselves to a good place. But I think also from a funding standpoint, it's going to take a while for unless we're in a school that the school supports us an awful lot financially. I think it's going to take a while for most of our band programs to booster programs to rebalance financially and be able to start making the kind of money that we were making even just a year ago, 2 years ago. And I would say that I've seen some preliminary stuff from my own school from a school budget standpoint, which we don't get much money at all here in Hardin County from their school, but I've seen those numbers starting to hint towards being lower also than they ever have been. So I kind of wonder, again, I don't have the data to really talk logically about this, but my gut tells me that it's going to take a while to recover financially from all this also.
At the risk of an uproar here on my screen, David touched on something I think you really ought to take into consideration. Curtis mentioned, redistributing the class sizes. David mentioned going to band size. You just stop to think about this now. This is coming from an old Paulette and I are the old folks here. Not Paulette, she's but the back in the day when we did the band size, it just something to think about, because all the bands are going to be smaller, and for at least a 1 year tracking period, you can kind of see what happens. You may want to consider that.
Well, this is the same conversation again. Honestly, it's just that everybody's talking about the problems, but the problems are pretty much everybody, from Lafayette and Madison Central all the way down to in Mayfield, Kentucky. Big to small, 5A, 10.5A to 2.1A band. The reason for classifications is so that we can have 5 champions. The reason for classifications is to give more kids a spotlight. People say, well, no, it's to make the competition more fair. Well, yes, I mean, you can look at it that way, but the other way is that it simply gives more bands a chance to be in that spotlight. And by going to 6 bands per class, that's even more bands. So it's a big conversation, and it has divided the band directors of Kentucky terribly over the past 10 or 12 years. So it is a hot potato, and I think that we can get the data. And remember this: the reason people decide they like band size, or they like school size, or they like a hybrid, is who it puts them against in their class, and what chance that makes for them to get into finals. That's the way everybody looks at it, and that's okay. That's how it works. I mean, it is just what it is. So people need a sense of it, and that when we make this is the reason everything's 50-50. I always say this, that all of our difficult decisions are 6-6 with a tiebreaker from the chair type of thing, is because everybody can see what it does. And half the people say that makes my situation better, and the other half says that makes my situation worse, because it's comparative. So I suggest that we do what we can to collect the data that David Centers mentioned, crunch the numbers. Boy, I'd sure like somebody else to do that, because that takes a day and a half. And see where that puts people. Of course, they don't even know now. They can't even tell you if they're going to do SMBC next year. But we can give it a best guess, and that'd be more than we have now. And maybe we can do that. have a report for April or have a report for February, possibly. I don't know. That's awfully soon for people to think they know what's going to happen next year.
John, I just wonder if the survey could be worded in such a way that in the best case scenario, assuming that your band is able to compete, or the circumstances present themselves to where a marching season, a competitive sanctioned marching season can happen, then questions like, number one, would your band be competing, period? Do you have an idea of what your numbers might be? Those type of things. But to, even though it's not going to be, it may change, at least we have a starting point there. So if we go on to the assumption that in a perfect world, this is going to happen. Okay. So what's it going to look like if you are able to be part of the sanctioned contest events for 2021?
Well, that removes a variable because Tim Zeiss might think, yeah, we'll be able to do that. And I can't think who. Nate Clark might think, no, I don't think we're going to be able to do that. And so if we remove that variable, then they're both going to answer based on if they can do it. And then, and then if you made a classification decision and it turned out, I don't know, if it turned out to be that Nate couldn't do it, I don't know, that just skews. It's really hard to say because there's just so much guessing. And it gets into the realm of those people who professionally do surveys. It's starting to get really complex as to what becomes a valid answer. In my head, I keep thinking, I think the hybrid thing takes care of this. I keep thinking in my head, the idea of it was, and the reason it passed, slim margin though it was, and controversial as how it came down, is that it takes your school size into account, that resource at your disposal, and it takes your band size into account, what you've got, and it averages the two more or less. And so it keeps, I'm going to use Mayfield again, Mayfield from competing with a 4A school that has a 1A size band, because the 4A school, theoretically, it's a little more select. That was the theory. I think this does it. It's just that it's going to be compressed down, and it's still probably the most fair way, no matter how it turns out. The way I'm seeing it now, I don't see everything, but that's, I'm not omniscient, but that's the way it looks to me, honestly.
Hey, John, if you and I had a conversation yesterday, and I just want to bring it up because I think it is an elephant in the room that some of us in here feel, and other band directors, it's been talked about for a while. But if anything, I hope that we have, and I say this, I am a competitive heart at nature. I mean, that's, I think many of us, we want to compete at the highest levels that we possibly can. And, but we also know that we talk a lot about what's happened over the last couple of years and how stressful this has become. And, I'm not necessarily complaining about it because it is the nature of our jobs and we are here and we signed up for it. But if anything, maybe this year, some of us have also been able to gain some perspective a little bit about this whole activity. And, maybe at some point, that can kind of fall into our thought process a little bit when we're trying to develop, if anything, what might happen in the future, that, trying to keep in perspective that we don't want to get back to, the band directors won't talk as they're at contest and everybody is just stressed to and I'm not suggesting creating a non-competitive environment. I am very competitive, and that's not at all what I'm referring to. But maybe just in our back of our heads, kind of keep that in mind, because I know I've gained some perspective this year, and I've talked to some of my fellow band directors. And John, you and I talked about this a couple of days ago or yesterday. We have gained some perspective and I think it's going to mean more to us when we're able to get all of this going again. And maybe this is an opportunity. I talked to a retired band director when all this stuff started, and And that band director told me, he said, you know, we're crazy. We don't realize that God gave us a gift to take a breath and realize what this really means to us right now. And this was somebody that was very, very competitive at a very high level in 5A. So, you know, I think that there's some truth to that maybe we just need to philosophically kind of keep hanging out in the back of our mind just a little bit. It's different than, you know, the data conversation and all that, but maybe just keep it there in our mind a little bit.
Thank you, Brian. Do we want to, I'm not sure if we need to form a task force for this, or if we maybe right now can just come up with some questions for the survey to include to collect data from. David, you mentioned several things there. Why don't we get in the next 5 minutes, let's come up with just a list of obvious questions that need to be asked. And then if we feel we need to form a task force, we can. So David, if you don't care, throw those items out again for possible consideration.
Pretty straightforward. I think that we would already have their band size from last year. Is that correct? Or would we only have their school size?
Both.
We'd have both. Okay, so we would have that number from last year. Really, this year would be band size, current year, to see what that difference was, how things were affected. And then, as best you can guess, a projected band size for next year. I know that's very early. Sometimes I didn't know my band size until June 30th, you know, but a projected band size. We have school sizes, so they wouldn't need to find that, correct? That's the 3 pieces of information. You know, those 3 points can give you a curve.
Hey, David, not to interrupt you, but would it be helpful to know possibly the middle school? Maybe what's happened on the middle school numbers this year?
That would be great
Probably,
to know as well. Yeah.
Yeah, we could ask that. As far as predicting the high school band size, I think the band director would automatically be taking that into account. He'd need to look, you know, in your case, look across the parking lot and see what's going to be coming. But that would be something to ask maybe middle school directors if we wanted to see that. I'm not sure how that helps us with our classification question, though. If the band director is going to predict his school size, including what he feels like he'll bring in.
Well, I really just kind of speak to see a long-term curve here. You know, what does that 6th grade band look like? Has it gotten really, really small? I mean, we think we all know the answer, but has it gotten really small? Has the middle school numbers decreased a lot? So just projecting a long-term curve, not necessarily the immediate future.
I think it'd be an interesting bit of data to see.
Tim, I was going to kind of piggyback on what we were just kind of talking about. I feel like from the band council's perspective, this information would be very helpful of seeing where we are. Because the other thing that I think we'll find, so that we need to probably tie into this, is what our concert band numbers are versus our marching numbers. So, for example, at Ryle, our marching band was significantly smaller. Our concert bands are pretty much the same as they were the year before. There were just either a lot of kids that chose not to march for whatever reason, you know, but our marching band numbers were smaller, or our concert band numbers really haven't changed that much. And then the other thing I would say is, I could be wrong. I think the best case that we would get between now and our February meeting would be to where programs are right now. I think to try to figure out where we're going to be in April right now is going to be next to impossible for most folks to be accurate. We don't know, because we don't even know which kids are going to sign up from 8th grade to high school band yet. We don't know any of that information. So it's going to be really difficult, I think, for us to get an accurate survey to kind of guide things from there. I think at best we're looking at doing this in the spring, once, you know, kids have at least signed up for classes from next year from our current program and from our middle school programs, what our retention level will be. And then also, you know, some of our recruiting efforts and seeing where that's going to be. I think we're going to have a much more accurate decision-making model if we wait on that future numbers. I think if we do it now, it's going to be lack of a better word, for me, it would be a shot in the dark. I have no idea. I have no idea what we're going to be looking at.
But on the other hand, don't most of us have an idea of a percentage that goes on to the high school every year? I mean, I kind of know from 8th grade to 9th grade, basically how many kids we drop every year. I think that most band directors, especially middle school band directors, have an idea percentage wise of how many they keep. It varies from year to year based on personality, but
I think what Brian just said is how I would feel about it. I think that considering what we've done with the school year, some of these schools haven't even seen their kids in person yet. I don't think that's going to be it might be exactly how it normally would go, but I don't know if I would bank on that at this point. There have been kids that we've lost from our program, though I know we wouldn't have lost if we weren't this way. Some of them, I lost all state students to this, so, those kind of things that they've decided to do something else because they couldn't play in class in person. So I think that this year is just going to be one of those years where we're not going to know stuff until, I guess, like where we're closer to it or past it at least. Because that's my thought anyway, is that, it'll be probably more accurate if we wait.
I agree, Joe. Another factor in this is that I feel pretty confident that come as late as August, right before school starts, sometimes shortly before school starts, parents and students, band students and their parents may have the option to, even if we're in person every day, they may have the option of learning remotely. And so we may not have those numbers, and we won't know those numbers right up until that time. So that comes into play as well.
And I think, we typically, even the last couple of years when we made this switch, we didn't know what our class was going to be until what was like August the 15th or something like that anyway. So I think as long as we're upfront with directors and say we're going to consider all of our options based on where we are, but we need to know where we are, I guess we could probably wait a little bit on that. But I do think it would be helpful for us to get the numbers of where we are. So just to get an idea, like you said, if across the state, it's bands are 50 to 60% of what they were the year before, that definitely gives us an idea of what to look at, I guess, what to expect to a degree.
I was thinking too, while we're having this conversation, and especially when Joe referenced the band council being in similar questions, I think it might be good that if we kind of support both groups and come up with questions that might be helpful in both categories. So things that are coming to my mind is that I'm wondering if it would be useful for us to put in that survey, what is your current situation? Like in District 8, I've seen half of my kids for 4 days in person, whereas maybe down the street, they've had 5 weeks where they've been on a hybrid model. So they've seen all their kids every other day. And so I think maybe getting some of that information might also help put some of these numbers into context and help us plan ahead. But I also think that might help us get the responses that we need if they see that it's going to validate more than one issue that we're trying to solve with KMEA.
Point of order, Tim. We're really encroaching into this discussion without meaning everything's well meant, and all these people are, of course, full band program directors, not just marching band directors. But this is band council sort of a discussion, and Joe may want to get that going with the band council as far as the breadth of the program and what all's happening. This discussion started asking about whether we ought to come up with a difference in classification, and David's questions, original questions, were to try and help to do that, and that's within the purview of the Marching Band Committee, I believe.
I was going to kind of state the same. It feels like the scope of this is getting very large, and it's all great. I've actually started putting together a survey just out of my own interest, and I've been working on it for about 2 weeks, just wording it. that deals with what Jenny was talking about, which is what is your current situation? How often are you seeing the students? Mine was going towards how much time are we actually seeing instrumental music students? But that was in the scope of the larger band context. So as John said, maybe kicking over to Joe and back to Tim, is this something that wants to be a joint effort or a larger effort, a larger survey, or do we want to keep this just very narrow and keep it just marching band?
I think for no other reason than to keep it more concise and more specific to our needs, that we probably do need to gear it toward our assignment, which is marching band. Band council can take what we have, certainly, and then couple that with information that it may be as simple as or as complicated as 2 surveys. But I do think we need to hone it down a little bit. I think the scope is a little bit big for us to consider all of these factors, even though there are several factors involved. I'm looking at the chat. Beth, does waiting until spring give us enough time to change classifications? Well, we haven't really decided whether we're going to change classifications or not. I think, to me anyway, right now, I'm thinking along the same lines as Dr. Strobe, that the current hybrid format does take everything into consideration. And until something drastic changes, I think we need to probably keep it that way and address it if change occurs. I've mentioned 2 things there. Is there any more commentary or input on the survey itself, of what might be included in the survey?
Tim, at the risk of creating another rabbit hole, I do think everything that we've talked about, it's going to be really, really hard for directors to pin down an exact band size number, even in August. You know, it's fluid. You know, we all hope things are going to be a lot closer to normal, but I think things are going to be very, very fluid. So maybe we think about, not today, and maybe not even, but maybe in February, just in the back of our minds, that maybe rather than an exact, I have 55 players in my group, I'm in a range of 30 and under, or 31 to 45, or however we put some generic and maybe even arbitrary ranges where people are pretty sure where they can settle. Because I think we're going to have kids floating in and out, hopefully back in, but kind of back to Brian's point earlier of putting the competition, still being competitive, but being realistic about it and having a healthy educational perspective about it. We want kids to participate that can participate. And we're going to have kids who don't know they can or don't feel comfortable participating until band camp starts, or maybe even until school starts. And I don't think we want to back ourselves into a corner where we're making educational decisions based on a kind of an arbitrary guess that we made at some point. And the data that we get from the survey can maybe help inform us a little bit on that. All right, there's 2 or 3 cents.
Thank you. Thank you, David.
Tim, at this point, I can't speak for everybody else, but my mentality on this right now is I'm worrying about today, now, and I'll worry about tomorrow. And I think the survey needs to be, where are you at right now? Like, let's assess now. And maybe there's one question at the end, like what David said, of if you had to ballpark an estimated range that you would fall in for next year, what would that be? And then I think we look to in the spring at some point, when people aren't having a shot in the dark, like Joe said, you know, that people have more of an idea of what it would be. And I agree, you know, in terms of the hybrid model, let's ride with that until we have data that people can give that's reliable data to, if any changes need to be made, make them at that point.
Thank you, Curtis. You know, I have a strong suspicion that this is going to be reminiscent of what we did over the summer, and where we have meetings probably once a month as changes occur. So I think we've all used the word fluid so many times, we're sick and tired of it, but it is that type of situation. So it wouldn't surprise me a bit if maybe by February we have a rough, very rough idea through a survey, and we keep monitoring that on a monthly basis anyway. And maybe by the end of the school year, maybe in May, who knows, things may look a lot brighter and looking up, and we can make an assessment and an evaluation and a judgment at that point.
As I think
Any
about
other-
it,
Go ahead.
I was going to say, as I think about it, it may be that the purpose of the survey, now that we've distilled it into its essence, is that we're trying to figure out if we start to detect a reason to change the classification system. We're thinking of leaving it alone, but we want to try and see where the bands go in terms of what class it would put them in based on the current formula, and if we're okay with that, or if something just goes crazy and we realize that we've got to do something different because it won't be as fair. And that's what we're looking for, watching for. If we don't see it, we leave it alone. I think that's what's being said.
I agree. Any other comments along these lines in terms of the survey? Dr. Strobel, do you feel like you have enough to start with? Good. Okay. Anything else? Okay. I'm looking at the agenda, and I had put a bullet in here that says eliminate spring concert festival assessment requirements to participate in 2021 state marching band championships. So any thoughts on that? Obviously we are, different bands or we all are going to be affected probably number wise. The uncertainty of what's going to happen in the spring in terms of what each teaching situation is going to be, whether it's hybrid, in person, totally remote. So any thoughts on that particular aspect?
Here's why this rule came into effect.
Okay.
Some band directors were starting marching band training in the second semester pretty quickly. You'd finish the marching season, you do a holiday concert maybe, and then after Christmas, you start working on that marching show. Let's get that thing ready. Got to win state fair. And then other band directors said, well, that's not right. I believe in concert band. Therefore, and I don't like this other band having the advantage of much more prep time than me because they're starting earlier, and therefore they win early season contests and continue to improve. So let's put a rule in that says there has to be concert festival. Everybody's saying thinks it's some philosophical thing. Well, that's part of it too, but that's not really where it came from. It came from the other. It could be early to be making this decision. It's very easy to quickly say this rule is everybody's exempt from this rule this year. That's not something that takes a lot of work. And it could be early to be saying that it's just not going to happen, or that, well, people don't want to go because their band's not as good as last year. So that's all I got.
For those of you that are not familiar with the state fair, it used to be, it actually used to be the quote unquote state championship, right? Terry, Pauletta, some of y'all with David. What's ironic about that is it was the first contest of the season. You had what was quote unquote the state championships occurred on August 20 something. You'd been in school a week and it was the biggest contest of the season. In any case, we were showing our age a little bit there, weren't we, John? In any case, again, I think it's valid that we keep the rule in place there. And maybe it just comes down to what has happened in some other cases where an exemption may have to be put into play for maybe a particular band for whatever reason. We've had those before, and it's a quick and easy fix. And I agree. I don't think it's necessary to make a blanket statement at this point at all. Any other comments about that?
I really feel strongly that I like what you said, Mr. Allen, about the exemption. You should have to apply for an exemption, I think. And I think you should have to go with whatever your district is doing. So like our district, I know District 6, we're probably not going to be able to have a concert assessment event in our district. But if we're back in person, we plan on going somewhere that does. If Lexington has an in-person, or if there's one in, Eastern Kentucky, we'll probably go there if we're able to. But I think this is a core principle that we really need to stick to. And if people feel like they can't do it, they just apply for an exemption, and the band council or whoever makes that decision can go from there. That's how I feel about it.
You could always go to Concert Band Festival for comments only.
Yeah, I mean, as a festival manager for my district, I can speak of that for a second when I'm trying to work on facilities. And I know that the PAC right now it's very touch and go. They're not willing to give, well, they are willing to pencil in a date right now. But the school system just closed down all after school stuff for the immediate right now for us. Now, I do agree it's too early to be making these decisions. But I think a lot of it's going to depend on that. And I also wonder, maybe is it time to, I can't believe I'm saying this out loud, but is it time to explore, that rule, Dr. Strobel, you said was put in place for the band directors that were starting really early. Is it time to model a little bit of Texas, saying that, hey, you can't start your marching band until this time period? It's just a thought, to throw it out there, but just a thought.
Well, as indoor marching band, the indoor marching winds. I mean, isn't that the same thing? So, I mean, marching band is year round now. It is. And I like keeping the idea of a concert festival requirement in there to say, hey, concert band should still be an emphasis on in your program and not just marching year round. And I don't know, are some districts going to have a virtual marching band, or a virtual concert festival, like we've talked about having a virtual solo and ensemble festival?
That has been discussed, even as a state level type of thing where you can submit.
Yeah, I like the idea of not changing any rules or anything right now. And I think, it needs to be taken into consideration what each district is able to do or not able to do. And as long as everybody's putting a good faith effort and trying to attend concert festival or have some sort of event, I think that should be the expectation. And then if circumstances don't allow for that and everything, then at that point, an exemption being requested. And I do remember some of those State Fair Harrison County bands, how they had the whole show, and then I couldn't figure it out.
No names, please.
I just wanted to echo what everyone else is saying, because this is the only topic of feedback that I got from District 8 is in regards to this question here. And so I just wanted to echo that. I think that all of these things are really important, but I think it might be something that we sit down and talk about later once we see what districts are actually able to do with concert assessment, because the individual district assessments themselves are going to dictate what we can and cannot do with this specific rule for the next season.
John, what's the process for exemption? How does that work?
People describe their situation in an email, basically, and it's considered by I can't remember right now. I think it may be considered by it's considered by the assessment. Yeah, the chair of the assessment committee. And if it seems like it's a gray area, or maybe they think they need to reject the proposal because it's shaky, they may take it to the whole assessment commission. But that's the body that it would go to for at least the first look.
And then correct me if I'm wrong, but like your decision and financial decision to attend it, is that still set at January 15th when you have to register and do all that good stuff?
It varies from district to district. January 15 is a lot of them. And yet, that's one of those deadlines. It's really more of a due date. You don't want to put your assessment manager in a bad spot. But oh gosh, there's a solo and ensemble district in one of our larger communities where we really had to crack down because the directors were being awful about it. And so we said, make it or you're out, but typically it's a little looser than that. The thing is, if January comes and we just plain don't know and people are having trouble committing, then their managers in their districts won't know enough to know if they have a viable event or how many days. Some of these districts are 3 days long and they don't know how many days to get the facility. So I think your point is correct. Band directors may not know, and they may not be able to assess whether they're going to put $100 and however many dollars toward this without being able to possibly get it back. So that's a really good point. You can't wait until April to find out what people are going to do.
Yeah, I guess that was kind of where I was leaning. And I guess I would imagine for most of you guys, we're not even 100% sure if we'll be back in person on January 15th.
Oh, yeah.
And, any of that. And especially if you're taking multiple groups in middle school and high school and all those other things, it's just something to consider with this. And it's probably not a marching band committee question. I just wanted to see, we're probably gonna have to clarify this for the band.
Yeah, well, for all, I think that's an assessment commission question actually, because it's for all divisions. And I've never experienced that KMEA decision makers are anything but compassionate about this kind of request for exemption. I remember a marching band where half the band got the flu one year. Remember the flu fall 3 or 4 years ago? And the guy said, we're all sick. So we can't go this week. And marching band chair said, understood. We'll see you the next week, and they were exempted because they just made a straightforward appeal. So we don't want to take people's money and then not give it to them and not give their money back. We don't want to do that. So we do need to think ahead about that. But a blank, this question was a blanket elimination, and I think I'm hearing most people think that a blanket elimination might be extreme, but we know good and well it's going to be dicey.
Okay, I have a question, please. First of all, I'm one of the ones that was accused way back when of not doing concert band, and I did concert band religiously. So I want to put that out there for the record. I didn't even know what my field show was going to be till July, whatever. But I think that the ruling is good that we keep this in here, okay? But we need to look at also what's going to happen if individual districts do not have a concert assessment. Are the bands going to be required to go to 5 districts over that has one?
Yeah. We've never required that. That's a good question. Last spring, as once, District 9 went ahead, did you recall? You and I were there. And so they all met the requirement had they needed it. Very few other districts were able to do that. And when we didn't offer it, we A, gave their money back, and B, did not require them to reschedule for some other district, which wouldn't have been there for them anyway. There's no rule that exactly lines that out, but that's been the precedent that is set, is that no, people are not required to do something unreasonable.
Okay.
Okay, the drift I'm getting is as we leave the rule in there, and if there are exemptions, we'll take them as they come. Okay, any other comments on that before we move on?
Do we need to streamline an exemption? Like have a form that people fill out instead of just everybody sending in an email?
Well,
It's not hard to type up your situation. I know what you're talking about. I thought about that too.
Just so it's all in one place.
Well, that's because you're anticipating, as am I, that there will be a lot of them.
Yes.
We can easily do that. If you need an exemption, type in here, what the heck's going on? Basically an open-ended thing. Why don't we do that? That's a good idea. That's actually an assessment commission question too, in a fashion. I'll chat with Kelly Mays, the chair of the commission, and see what suggestions she has. She's very bright about that kind of thing. And we can provide that.
okay. Anything else on this matter? Okay. So we've talked a little bit about, if it is a quote unquote normal season and we are able to have sanctioned contest and a state marching band championship, something that we probably need to start a discussion on is what if it does become very evident that it's going to be, say, similar to this year, or there are a lot of questions about there are still safety protocol issues and maybe COVID doesn't go away. Do we need to start conversations about a plan B? I know that as I mentioned, Dr. Strobey's mentioned, others have mentioned too, that this particular past fall, there were some virtual performances. There were opportunities for bands to perform virtually, to perform in person. I think, if I'm not mistaken, one of the comments in the survey was, does KMEA want to get involved with doing such a thing where they sponsor, where they have sanctioned virtual opportunities? Is this an option? I'm just reaching out here. Is there a scenario where there would be a Kentucky State marching band virtual championship? I don't know. I'm just throwing these out here. And again, it's very, very broad. I'll just kind of open that rabbit hole and see what input we have on that. So it's very broad. So any input? Hearing none, then we'll move on.
I'll talk for a second. I think that everybody is of the same belief that our marching bands are the most visible parts of our program. So whatever we can do to make it accessible for as many students and programs as possible, to be relevant to our community, to our administration, and relevant at the state level, and be as visible as possible, I think that's going to set us up for a more timely recovery, if you will. I think we just need to redefine our priorities this next year. And I know I don't have a ton of skin in the game right now, but this next year should be about giving kids opportunities to be a part of this awesome experience. And that's why we're all here right now talking, is how are we going to make sure that kids get opportunities next year? And if you give a kid an option to take the easy way out, they're going to do it. How are we going to keep our programs valid? How are we going to make sure they get the opportunities that so many have had before? So whatever we can do, if it's virtual competitions, I know my district, there were several programs that did that, and they felt really strongly that it was a great experience for their students. Anything is better than nothing.
Thank you, Connor. Do you have any specific input about, or from your district, about how, this might be approached? I mean, is there a way to, well, let's put it this way. Do you think this is something that KMEA needs to be part of, or do we still treat it like an unsanctioned, independent type setup like we had this past fall?
I'm not sure that there's a correct answer there. I'm sure everyone would be more apt to be involved if it was a KMEA sanctioned event. But as I said, anything is better than nothing.
Thank you,
Are you
Connor.
possibly envisioning, Connor, an assessment for, let's say, a rating and judges to then come on screen and give comments to the band they can watch the next day in class or something like that?
Yeah, anything. If someone wants to do comments only, they can do that. Just whatever we can do to stay relevant and give kids performance opportunities.
I'm going to piggyback off what Connor said. We weren't able to compete this year, but I did watch all of the competitions that did happen this year, and I was kind of blown away by what I saw in a very good way. I thought that the contests that were able to happen were ran pretty well, and I did like the fact that there were options for people to do either in person or virtual performances. And I mean, if you're doing that, I mean, some circuits ran completely on virtual. I think that it was really good for those kids, kind of like what Connor's saying. Something's better than nothing. And I think that if we really want to keep people invested in KMEA, because we know that that is also an issue, then I think KMEA needs to jump on board and get with this. Because if I'm going with my gut, I have a feeling that mid-states will jump on board with this for next year. And BOA probably will too. And I'm not saying that KMEA is competing with those circuits, because a lot of us do both or three of those circuits. But if we want to keep people invested in our state organization, then we need to do something for everybody in this state.
Yeah, I agree totally with you there. And, I think when we made the decision last year, I think we were a leader in our state, and we were a leader in the activity for doing what I thought was right. And I think we made that hard decision, but I think looking to the future, I think we need to invest in making something happen, no matter what it is. And if we're still in the same situation, I think even a virtual, I mean, I participated in one of those from an evaluation standpoint, and I can tell you that side of things was a whole lot easier than I thought it was going to be. And it laid down really, really well. I was surprised at watching videos that, you could still do that evaluation side of things very well. So I agree totally that if something, if things don't change, I think that to keep us relevant, to keep everybody invested in things. Agreed, Michael, that I think we need to provide that.
I also think that if this is the approach that we decide to go, I think it would be a good idea to start planning for that now as a plan B, as Tim pointed in there, because I feel like a lot of the things that we dealt with for this past season and making that decision is because we were very reactive, which we had no other choice. But I think that if the opportunity for us to be more proactive for the opportunities available for this upcoming season, that's a really good thing.
So I have a question about this. In the agenda, it says Plan B for state marching band championships. But then Connor and Michael and Brian were also talking about regular season. So are we talking about sanctioned regular season virtual or whatever, depending on the situation and being prepared for that, that would be required to go to state marching band championships, depending, again, it's all situational where we are next year. Is that what's in question, or are we only talking about just state marching band championships?
I think we're talking about the whole ball of wax, David. Because the state championships are based on what happens in the regular season, I think it's kind of a given. That's a mistake I made by putting SMBC. It's the whole ball of wax, in my opinion. So we need to address sanctioned contest or KMEA contest and what leads to a culminating event. Other insights, input?
It could be, if that were to be the case, there could be one statewide assessment event for marching bands that's virtual. That there's one per week, and you can go to as many as you want. Don't submit an old video, submit a new video. I'm just spitballing here. And if you do a couple of them, I mean, if we wanted to stick by this, once you've done a couple of those, then you could put in for the championship end of things. Maybe. I smell a subcommittee coming on here, Tim.
Yeah, I do too. It's because it's pretty broad. And I know that Scott Sexton's on the line here. He's going to talk to us in the summit. And I know that Pulaski County has, and others that are here today have competed at other events outside of Kentucky and might have some insight as to how that worked as well. But I do think this is it's going to take some in-depth data collecting and information gathering and coming up with some different scenarios as well. So let me just, I'm just going to go ahead and throw this out here right now. Are there any of you that would be interested in serving on a task force for addressing, well, I'll put it as broad as Plan B for the 2021 marching season? Any takers?
I would gladly do that.
I will as well.
I will.
Ryan, Austin, who's that?
I will as well.
Michael, did you say yes? Michael?
Yeah.
And Beth?
Yes.
Okay.
And
That's-
Jenny's also available if you need anyone else.
Okay. I think that's good, Jenny. Thank you. I think we'll stop there. And that's great.
Tim, I want to check. Did we have Austin, Jenny, Michael, and Beth? Was there anybody else?
And Brian. Brian, did you say yes?
I did. I'd gladly do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Very good. Yeah, that's a pretty broad topic, and so it's going to take some digging, and we'll set up a couple meetings and get started on that. Any other broad input in terms of that you want to say right now as far as toward the task force in this regard? Is there a big thing that, we've talked about virtual. Is there something else that in your mind you thought of that might be another option, big picture option?
No, but I think that the virtual end of it will allow a lot more groups to actually participate, because there's going to be such a financial restraint on everybody. It's already mentioned about the fundraising and the board cutting funds. I think this would actually help bands to be able to participate without having all the financial burden of travel and expenses of that nature.
Thank you, Paulette. Anything else? Okay, so what I'm hearing so far then from our meeting today is we're going to develop a survey. We didn't really decide when it was going to be sent out just yet. Are we waiting, Dr. Strobel? You think we're going to wait until, say, January or February?
I think that is plenty soon enough.
Yeah. Okay. And then we have a task force that's been developed to study a plan B for what might transpire for next season as well. Anything else from anybody? Okay. So before we adjourn the meeting, or after we adjourn the meeting, we will have a summit. I think we have two speakers that will address us. But before we do that, I just want to make sure, is there anything else from this particular business meeting that anybody would like to discuss? No?
Before you adjourn, you do list a possibility of, well, I put it in February 27. The reason I suggested that is All State is the first week of February. We intentionally put professional development conference 2 weeks after that, the third week of February, so that we wouldn't be trying to do both at the same time. And I'm going to suggest that we don't need to meet during the professional development conference. That's just one more darn thing. If we could put it the following Saturday, the 27th, then that gets it a week after and gives time to, focus on putting together materials for that meeting. So unless somebody has an objection because it's exactly when everything else happens in your school, that's my proposal that we schedule for then.
Does anybody have a problem with that particular date, February 27th? All right, let's plan on that then. Last chance for any comments. Do we have a motion for adjournment?
I'll make a motion.
Yeah, I see Michael Stone's face lit up there, so we'll say Michael Stone. Who seconded?
I'll second.
Beth. Beth seconded. Okay. If there are no objections, all right, no objection, then this meeting is adjourned. But don't leave. There's more to come. So we now move into something that was started, gosh, what's it been? 5 years now?
4 or 5, yeah, 4 or 5.
Yeah, where we have a summit, which is an opportunity for KMEA members to come forward and offer some suggestions that might improve our situation. And we have Scott Sexton from Pulaski County and Michael Woolley from South Laurel. And Scott, are you here? Okay. Okay.
I'm here.
All right, Scott's here. And Michael, are you here?
I am.
All right, very good. I'll just take this in the order. We'll take Scott first, if nobody has any objections. So according to our quote unquote rules for the summit, you've got 15 minutes to speak to the committee. And so Scott, it's all in your court. Scott, are you there?
Looks like he jumped out of the meeting.
Okay. His audio was pretty, it wasn't real clear, so he may have decided to go a different route. Okay. We'll go ahead and go with Michael then. Michael, would you like to present?
Sure. My video has been muted, so I don't know who's in control of that. You probably did not want to see my ugly face this morning. Is that you, Dr. Stroby, that's got the video muted?
I think I've given you an invitation to start. Sorry.
There we go. Okay. After all the COVID discussion, I feel like all my stuff's irrelevant, but I'll do my best. One of the things, I'll start with the least significant one. It was something I started last year before the pandemic that never got off the ground because of the pandemic, and it was the smoke effect rule. And the only reason that I'm bringing it back up is so that it's changed. One would argue that it's insignificant, but this could also be an opportunity to take care of some things that, changes when things do come back to normal, that this is a better opportunity. So basically what we got out of that was we started presenting alternative methods for smoke effects other than the fire extinguisher, which is a several-year-old rule. And actually, the data I have found says that that's actually dangerous. And currently, it's the only allowable smoke effect. But there have been new technologies developed by stage productions and things like that that would allow for a safer avenue for those things. Where we were last time was that a presentation was asked, but we have not got to that point because of the pandemic. So I'm basically just reviving this proposal until a demonstration can be had, and I don't know when that is, but the basic proposal is alternative smoke effects that are deemed safe for kids and permissible by KBA. And, you know, some of us have used the fire extinguisher before, and some of us have been approached at various events just to make sure that we were not breaking the rules. So just to kind of avoid those annoying nuances, that's why that's in effect. So the next step would be that a demonstration is given for that to change. So I don't know really where to go from here. Dr. Strubbe, could you advise?
My advice is the same as I think about a year ago, whenever we had our summit, I think, and you brought this, was it just last year? Or the year before?
It was this year, or the
Okay.
last year.
Yeah. So, which is to get together with your expert. Currently, the way we're doing things, if you can get a good get them to provide a good video that shows how it works, what it is, really lines it out so that we're not just saying or being asked to say any smoke effect is okay, but specifically what it, because some are probably not good. And in fact, I've read about some that are not good. But you know, so that the rule could be changed to say CO2 fire extinguisher, or exactly what we're talking about here with the technology and the language, so that it's very specific. I will push back a little bit. I don't know that I haven't seen anything that says the CO2 fire extinguisher situation is unsafe or that anybody's been hurt. It's not happened in KMEA history, that's for sure. So somebody can speculate that, but I'm not sure that's provable, I guess is the word I'm looking for. Hope that answers.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's no evidence of that happening. The stuff I read was it's not, it could be dangerous to inhale or direct skin contact up close. Obviously, we're smart enough to make sure that doesn't happen, but you know, it's just one of those things. So I'll move on to my second proposal, which is not a revise. And I was very careful to make sure that this did not come off self-serving, but and I hope it doesn't. But I think if you hear me out on some of this stuff, it will certainly make sense. Something that I was kind of mind-boggled by when I go to BOA events, you know, Carmel gets done and they rattle off 7 assistant band directors and all the program accomplishments and all that kind of stuff. And at the KMEA level, we recognize the head band director, and the head band director is presented on the LAD board. And basically my proposal is that because at regular sanctioned contests, we recognize assistant band directors, we do not at the state level. My proposal is that at KMEA sanctioned events, assistant directors are announced, and at finals, they appear on the LAD board. My second part of that proposal is after the program has performed, significant program achievements are read, much like they do at BOA. I've never pulled the BOA card because we don't do that, but just participating or being an observer of the event. So in other words, it would be like the XYZ band is a 10-time state finalist, a 4-time state champion, a BOA class champion, a BOA regional champion, has been selected to perform at Midwest, the KMEA conference, and then additional staff include. I know that's a lot, but I'm going to kind of go over some of my rationales here. You know, programs now are truly more team effort than ever before because of all that goes into it. Without the challenges of the pandemic, we are often finding ourselves justifying board stipends, assistant positions, extended days. now with the challenges of this pandemic, I think it's more important than ever. In an arena to recognize the village it takes to make these programs successful will advocate and justify these positions. If you can imagine, a administrator comes to state finals to watch their program's first appearance, maybe that band director has been trying to justify an assistant or stipend positions, and they hear all these staff members coming from these other programs. That may be a way to advocate for those positions. And, you think about when, in college football, they don't just recognize the head coach. They recognize the defensive coach and the offensive coach and, this, that, and the other thing. We strive to recognize other activities coaching staff, but we don't recognize this activity's full staff at the state level. Another rationale I have is if KMEA is a programs only avenue, those sacrifices and the dedication made by those other staff members, recognized in front of potential administration, the community that's attending, and the students and parents of the actual organization, that's a way to shed light on really what it is taking, and it also shows that there's an appreciation level for the team it takes from the governing organization. Just an example, if a band makes KMEA and we open the program, we're down to listing lesson staff that came in twice and worked a sectional. But the activity that takes up the most of our time and the most of our finances, we aren't celebrating the whole team at our state level event. So I think that celebrating the entire team in its entirety at our culminating event is important. Another point I'd like to make is at some juncture, a lot of the head band directors, even in this meeting, were once assistants, and or middle school directors that did the assistant thing too. And I think that they could probably think back to the time and dedication that they put into those programs they were once with, or maybe they're the head director of that program, and think back if that recognition and celebration of the entire team would have been appreciated. So just something to think about. And my last point on that part, before I get into program celebration and recognition, I think the arts are often a celebration of diversity, more so than other activities. And there are so many people in what we do that I think is more diverse than other things. When you're looking at our activity, there are so many members of the LGBT community and people of color and people of all kinds of different backgrounds that make our thing really special and unique. And celebrating our entire team that makes these things happen, I think, is very appropriate at our culminating event. So that's my justification on that. Dr. Strobe sent me an email asking my exact specific proposal. I did not do that for the reason of, I think that discussion probably should happen. One of the things he asked was, would it be read, the band is under the direction of blank with assistance from, or the band is under direction of blank and blank? I think so many of these situations are unique that I did not really put a lot of thought into that. He also had mentioned some are KMEA members and some are not. So I think that those are things that need to be discussed on behalf of the committee. And then my recognition of the program post-performance. So, you're supposed to be off the field by the 14-minute mark, which leaves a minute left. But typically those things are read as soon as the salute happens. And obviously, the same time frames allotted at Bands of America. And we're talking, about, Carmel rattling off 7 directors. I'm just making stuff up. And, a slew of recognitions. So I don't think that time's really an issue. But for me, I think this is another advocacy thing for administrators and communities to hear about programs' successes. And I think that extra recognition is really important. I also think that it gives an opportunity for, if XYZ band was selected to perform at Midwest or the KMEA conference, you are highlighting a concert achievement at a marching event, which I think also shines some light on the holistic program and celebrating things outside of the marching band that may aspire other people to, or inspire other people to seek those accomplishments. But it's basically a celebration of the program, and since it's our culminating event, I think that is relevant. But I also think it creates a better sense of respect for spectators to learn more about programs instead of bands that are defined by the winning or losing score. But like a respect for the holistic program, and it might open up some eyes to, what's really happening behind the scenes. So that's my proposal. It's basically a 2-part. I don't know the procedures after this. I don't know if it's open up for discussion, but that's all I've got.
Thank you, Michael. So if I understand correctly, we're talking about all of what you said. This 2-part proposal is based on the culminating event, as in the last, we're talking about finals, at awards at finals, correct?
Yeah. So the second part, yes. The first part, I would say, needs to be the quarters and semis as well. Talking about staff recognition, and I don't know, if the listing the additional staff at the end is feasible at those events. But if I'm not trying to speak for myself, because I know that there's the Austins of the world when he was at Adair, and there's the slew of other people, Beth at Murray, all of these people that put in the time and energy and emotional aspect to their programs, that I think deserve that respect and honor for what they have done for their programs.
Okay, I understand. So I just did a couple more questions to clarify for everybody. So you had mentioned awards. I know that at BOA, they do announce awards as bands are coming off the field. I know that KMEA does have a policy that does not condone, it's a rule that says you may not mention any past awards before or after, because it may influence, the reason behind that was that it may influence judges' scores and that sort of thing. So again, I'm trying to gather my thoughts here in terms of what order we should take this in. So well, I have an opinion, and before I give it, I think I'd rather hear what others have to say. Is there anybody else that has input on this? Or I can go ahead and tell you what I think.
I'll chime in a little bit. I'm on board with Michael on all that. Being at BOA events, I think they do a great job of recognizing everyone on the staff and on the team. And as a former assistant director, it is a great feeling when you hear your name called for the first time. So I'm on board with him with that. And I don't think timing is really an issue, because we still have our 14-minute window. where we're gonna get the show in and get the announcement done. It happens right after the salute. I don't think it's going to put anything off schedule. I didn't realize that the rule was in place because of to not try to sway judges' opinions, which I guess that makes sense. I'm not sure how the committee feels about that now. I don't know how old that rule is, but I agree with a lot of what Michael said.
Yeah, so there's actually two things in play here. One is one thing we're talking about is awards, past awards given, and the other one is recognizing assistants and staff. So I think we might need to approach that separately. And two, this is my take on this. I think it's certainly valid that assistants need to be recognized. I'm not so sure about staff, but here's what I'm going to suggest, or I'm going to throw out for discussion anyway, is as far as announcements or even putting on the LED board at state finals, what information goes up there. I think the safe thing to take it out of individual hands of this committee is to simply maybe have on the form that, or somewhere on the form when bands initially turn in their applications for marching band, who they would like to recognize. Maybe even have a section on there that says, this is the announcement that will be made. The such and such band from such and such county, head director so-and-so with assistance from, and put that in the lap of the head director to decide who does get recognized. I know for a fact that there are, Michael, you mentioned it's a village, and it certainly is. And there are some staff members that are maybe help out once or twice the season, and others that are there every single rehearsal. And, the band director has to make a decision about, well, how much recognition should they get? My personal feeling is that, the head director is the head director for a reason. And so he or she makes the decision on who should be recognized. So that's my take, and maybe a suggestion that would alleviate the burden of this committee to make that decision. Let the head director decide who should be recognized, both on the LED board and in the program. Thoughts? Just in addressing that particular aspect of it.
I think I'm going to just quickly address both. I think I agree with Michael and Austin. I think that's a great idea to do this. I know at BOA events, my kids love it. They love getting done with the show, and then they love hearing the little list at the end of all the stuff. Even some of the stuff they weren't even in. And then as far as letting the directors decide, I think that's kind of like what BOA does. I know when I fill out my forms every year to participate in regionals and grand nationals, it's part of the form. And it's just a question on there. Who do you want read off? Kind of something like that. And if we needed to kind of see what they do, then I'm sure I could very easily get that from them. And I think it's good to, recognize everybody, because I know myself when I was the assistant for my own band, I was Eric's second band. And so it was nice to, even though I was there the same hours he was, actually, I'll take that back. He was there several more hours than I was. But I was at rehearsal the same as he was. Now my assistants, they're with me the same amount that I was with him. So it's nice to recognize those people. And I do think that the directors, I think our head directors, we need to make sure that we recognize our people. And even some staff, because I know like Debbie Hale works with us. She's not a director, she's a staff member, but she's at every single rehearsal, and she's there before and after. I consider that partially a director. So when I go to BOA, I list her as a director so that her name gets read off. So I do think that we need to make sure that we're recognizing our people, and directors need to make the decision on who they're going to recognize.
I also think that it's really good for us to establish that kind of example, template, whatever you want to call it, for young directors coming out and helping them remember that it does take a village to make it happen. And personally, I think allowing the staff to be recognized. I don't know about you guys, but we just pay them in peanuts, hugs, and booster food. But so to have their names mentioned at state finals, I mean, that's such an epitome for them to be able to hear that they're associated with bands who make finals. And as an assistant who for 34 years hasn't heard their name mentioned, it would be kind of nice. I got to admit.
I'll chime in too. Beth, I'm glad you said that because I did not want to come off self-serving because I've been doing what I'm doing for 10 years. But, I do what I do for the kids. And my stipend is $1,000 and I put every dime of that back into the band. And I'm literally not joking. I usually joke that I pay to be the assistant because I put so much of my own money into what we do just to cut corners and stuff financially because it takes so much money to do this. But, back to the staff thing, they go the entire season without a recognition. So as far as a culminating event goes, I certainly think state finals would be an appropriate place to list the staff in its entirety. And I can tell you, and I'm sure a lot of you could, our little puzzle, I think if you take one piece of our puzzle out, it drastically changes. And that says a lot about each person that contributes, even in the smallest way. So in terms of like that staff recognition, I think that's a validation to them. And I think it's a pride thing for them too, that they are working with a group that made finals. So, I do think it should be left up to the director, but I think the option to list program accolades and additional staff when the program's over is certainly appropriate. As far as the rule being in existence so that judges aren't swayed, I would hope that, at least my feeling on the matter is, at the state level, we are hiring the elite, and I just don't imagine that they can't decipher between programs based off of past achievements and what they just adjudicated. However, if that's a legit concern, there's also the opportunity to list program accomplishments after the placement. So in other words, in fourth place, the blah, blah, blah band, there's that whole entire awkward silence that exists between the students receiving the plaque and the medals before third place is announced, and then so on and so forth. That could be an opportunity to do the program recognitions at the state level, if that were a legitimate concern. For me, it's not. I'm just giving an alternative solution to that concern.
Okay. Any other thoughts on the announcement of past accolades?
We used to do this as bands were coming on the field. And the reason, as Tim mentioned, that the announcement started getting out of hand. And, not only were we getting accolades, but we were getting, during the contest, we were getting football scores from the announcer. We were getting, what do they call them, the announce-o-gram things, where Grandma Nanny would say, "Go, Michael, go." And it became pretty unprofessional. But I think that the audience, the other parents would like to know what these other bands are accomplishing. And I think the point about having that information in those parents' minds might be a great opportunity for them to go back to their administrators and say, well, one of the reasons that we can't climb this mountain is, we don't have enough help with the band director's doing it all himself. And I don't see anything wrong with it. I think I think it'd be okay.
I'd like to just chime in. I'm all for recognizing assistant directors for sure. And just reading some of the chat, I am concerned about recognizing designers. I'm just going to be honest. Anytime that, I've had a group be fortunate enough to make finals, I'm worried about tweets that have went out that day of designers that are like, good luck to my group today, and, we do bring in these top-notch people, but a lot of these top-notch people are interconnected and they know this is so-and-so's group. And, I don't want to tell so-and-so that their design was bad. So I'm going to maybe score it differently than I should. I do like the BOA model in terms of once the competition is over and the scores have been plugged in, and you go through and recognize each group and say, here's our finalists in Class A. This is such and such school. This is the first time they've ever made state finals, or this is the 27th time they've made state finals. And here's some of their accolades, and here's some of the staff they would like to recognize in this moment. I think that kind of way of going about it would not influence potentially any of the scores that go on. So I do think recognizing these people are important. I like everybody has said, it takes a village to do all this, but there is, with anything, there is potential for this to get used and abused in a way that could sway things if it's not handled appropriately. And, I know that for my own assistant, there's a lot of times that I've went out of my way to make sure that she gets recognized by when I'm filling out those forms. And I think, it is on the forms for a lot of the things that we do, but I think there's a lot of responsibility that needs to be placed on the head directors to make sure that, that they're going out of their way to make sure that it's recognized in the program. And, I think sometimes we all get in that rut of we're filling out these things. It's like, okay, director's name, put it in your name and go on to the next one. But there needs to be something there that says, hey, this is going to be used for this purpose. Is there anybody else that you want to list? You want to put your assistant down. But I'm worried about, especially as Brian has brought up, the designers being recognized as groups are going off the field. I do like the thought of having accolades and that kind of thing announced after the numbers have been put in, and you're recognizing each group maybe individually that way.
I think one thing to consider here is on the BOA level, we need to realize that, those are bands coming in from all over the place. And when a judge sitting up there hears that, so-and-so band was a state finalist for however many years, that really doesn't mean anything to that judge. Now, when you get up to the top 12, obviously that's a different situation, but those bands were already recognized by any judge that's in there anyways. So whereas when we're talking about a state level, those kind of announcements could, and I can tell you as a judge that has judged at some pretty high levels, in the state championships for Winter Guard, I want to say, and I think if we're being honest with ourselves, I want to say that stuff doesn't have an impact. But when they announce that stuff, this group has won 10 gold medals over the past previous years. I mean, it's hard to ignore that stuff, and it's hard to get that stuff. We work very hard to get it out of our mind, but it is hard to ignore it. I love the idea of that stuff, Michael, that you mentioned being announced, because that award ceremony at the end between quarterfinals and semifinal, I mean, it is long. It is, and I'm not trying to say make it longer, but it is the most tense place. But having some of that stuff being announced there, I think that is a really, really cool idea. If you could find a way to make it concise and not get out of control, but I think that is a perfect place right there.
So it seems to me that the ideal place to do that would be, as Michael mentioned as an option, maybe after the results were in, and then after in between each award is given, the announcer makes comments to their accolades, that had happened in past years. So that would avoid any kind of collision with judges' decision making. Any other comments?
If we do decide to have it after the competition, I would think it would need to be held during the pass and review part of finals and not while all the bands are standing on the field. Just my opinion.
That would be a good place to have the accolades, but I still think that your assistant directors and your immediate staff need to be when the band is brought on the field, because all these other bands are not going to get that, all these other, that's a small group that's going to be in finals. So I think every band that's there needs to know, who's helping these bands, because it's going to be with parents going back to the administrations to say, so-and-so band beat us, but they've got 2 assistant directors, yada, yada, And I think those assistant directors and staff need to be recognized.
I'm going to chime in. All of these are really great points. I have one devil's advocate thing for the pass and review, or even the in-between placements that I didn't think about when I suggested that. So many people leave the stadium before those things happen. And the point of all this is for advocacy. And again, I understand the points 100%. I'm just being devil's advocate for the holistic viewpoint. But the audience size is like probably 25% of what it was when 5A's finished.
Okay, but then if you go back to if you're going to do it, if you're suggesting to do it when the bands are coming on the field or leaving the field, like BOA, go to Class A, and the amount of people that are in stands then is extremely little compared to how many's going to be in the stands during the pass and review.
I agree 100%. And that was my fault for not recognizing that either. But yeah, there's negatives to both situations. So, but that's a good point.
So we probably still need to address I think if I'm reading the committee correctly, there's not too many objections to the idea of recognizing assistants, staff, if the head director so deems, and the idea of announcing accolades at some point. What we're still stuck on is when might be the best time to announce accolades. I think it would be feasible to certainly have to mention assistants and staff as they're coming on the field. But we're still at a crossroads here in terms of when accolades might be mentioned. I'm seeing Connor says in between classes to remove bias. So Connor, announce in between classes.
Once all the 2A bands are off the field, then they can all be recognized for their accomplishments. The scores are done at that point, right?
But the issue with that is there's not a break. So it's the same time frame as going from one 2A band to another 2A band as it is going from a 2A band to a 3A band. So you would have basically a couple minutes to get 4 bands recognized, which I don't think is feasible.
I think that the best time to do it, I think Austin mentioned this in the chat. At Grand Nationals, they recognize accolades. They do it. I mean, they do it, as you're going off the field, but they also do it again at finals as you're coming on the field. So if we did it during pass and review, like someone mentioned, or if we did it in that awkward time when we're all sitting there trying not to vomit between placements at finals, that would be a great place. Speaking from personal experience, that would alleviate a lot of stress on me, just hearing what other people have done, instead of standing there and worrying if our name is going to get called next.
I keep chiming in. I'm sorry. The awkward spot that Michael's talking about that I mentioned earlier, I think the audience tends to be a little more attentive during that time than they are during pass and review. And and I don't disagree with the pass and review, but I don't know that the attentiveness is going to be there. I think there's going to be a lot of chatter. And I don't know if that kind of defeats the purpose of that. So I kind of like the idea of, once the competition part's over, in fourth place, the blah, blah, blah band, and then that awkward silence is filled with accolades. That's kind of my take on that if we're against the idea of doing that as bands come on the field.
I could be wrong, as I know we keep talking about that awkward silence, but a lot of it is just walking the drum majors to get the plaque and then they take a picture and go. They seem to try to move that as fast as they can. The other thing that we have to consider too, remember each class is going to have 2 more finalists in it. So that award ceremony is already going to be longer. It seems like the pass and review would be a really logical place to put it because it wouldn't really impact the timing of it at all. And then kind of like a second applause too, I guess, for your band, if that makes sense. When you're going through, they announce your band, you get the first applause and then read off the accomplishments and get another one and go on to the next one.
Tim, we've heard a lot of options and I've got them. I mean, they're recorded on YouTube. I'm recording it to my computer as well. And I'm going to take serious notes about it. And I think that possibly the next time we meet, we could look at an intention to do with some of the problems worked out that I think have been pretty well covered here. Possibly at quarterfinals and semifinals, it could be right after the plaque is given. And then at finals, we can see, I know I have trouble getting out there in time with the medals in my hand at finals because we do try to compress it as much as we can. Some drum majors are going back to their band while others are coming up. I'm surprised we don't have a high five opportunity. So it could be that the pass and review is the least awkward place, the best place. Maybe we can look at a video of finals and of the pass and of the the award ceremony and see how that would be. And anyway, come to February and try to have a plan hashed out that can be tweaked at that time.
Sounds good to me. Any other comments along these lines?
Yeah, one thing, I think that we definitely need to make sure that it's only like the assistant directors and immediate staff and not the drill writers and arrangers and all that is announced.
I'll look at the BOA thing that people have referred to and see what they ask and see if it doesn't cover that. Somebody thinks it does, so it probably does.
Dr. Strobey, what do I need to do further to get an official, or is this to send it to Curtis? Do I need to write up the official proposal?
You've already done what you need to do.
Okay, so nothing else for me. We're good
on this topic of recognition of assistant directors and announcing, giving accolades to bands. Your presentation was perfectly adequate, and the committee has it in their mind, and we'll go forward.
Okay.
I do have Scott Sexton on FaceTime. I apparently blocked him out of the meeting. I don't know how I did it. Here's Scott, everybody. It's mini me. And he's ready to talk.
Hello. Hopefully everyone can hear me. I am speaking today from the perspective of a director who did press forward this past fall with marching band. Of course, when the decisions were made back in July, I know those were not made easily. Of course, I was on the band council, and of course, I watched all of the marching band council meetings, and I was able to see all of the thought processes that went into that. And I know it was not a decision that was made easily. And at that point, we were one of those groups who had just finished our first week of camp, and we were faced with the decision of, do we press forward with competitive marching band? Do we go non-competitive, or what is next? And I know that was the question that everyone was facing. We were also concerned about financial implications, all of the different things that everyone had discussed in those meetings. And when I met with my students and when I met with my boosters, we did make the decision to continue competitively. But to do so with a conservative approach, we decided to shelve the show that we had planned for the current year. We did put together a show actually completely geared toward events in 2020 and recycled lots of props and different things from the past and put together an entirely new musical and visual program. We were one of those groups also who were faced with the potential of not having band classes. Fortunately, our administration at both schools were able to listen to the voice of reason and be able to listen to possibilities of ways that we could make that work following all of the protocols that were being put forth by the state. And so we were able to work out a way in which to be able to meet with our students. Of course, we have been in person only since October 12th. We were fully virtual the first part of the year. And of course, now we're going back virtual as well. But during this span, we were able to find several opportunities to be able to perform and to compete. We were able to perform in person at one football game. We were able to do one in-person competition that was at Barron County. And we were able to, of course, host our own competition, the Pulaski County Invitational. Both the Barron County competition and ours were both hybrid events. I know that Tim and Pauletta were both adjudicators for our event. And so they were able to see kind of how that worked. And fortunately, that was received pretty well by all of the directors, the adjudicators, and came across pretty successfully. We were also able to compete in the U.S. band circuit, and were able to do 6 different competitions with them, including 2 championships events. We did one, Mid-States was mentioned earlier. They actually did a competition through the Central States Judges Association. We did that one as well as the Commonwealth Pageantry Circuit. All 3 of those were ran pretty well. I think that the format that U.S. Bands was able to implement was able to accommodate the needs of the most groups, which allowed smaller ensembles to also compete if they were not able to compete as a larger unit. They did offer ensemble classes versus marching band classes in addition to the actual marching band competitive classes, and of course offered competitive events as well. So we did have very positive experiences through all of those circuits. And of course, I'll be happy to answer any questions you have about those in a minute. For our competition, we did decide to press forward. We hope to do that in a hybrid format that initially presented our health department with a fully virtual option, as well as some possibilities to do that as a hybrid event. Luckily, in the end, what was approved was for us to do a limited crowd capacity of 30%. We were able to offer 2 different sessions of in-person groups, which consisted basically of 3 to 4 competitive bands. And then, of course, our band performed an exhibition at the end of both of the in-person groups. We based our classification, since it was an independent competition, based on the needs of the groups that were coming, and offered a large and small class for both virtual and for the in-person groups. We did have good participation. We did have a total of 6 groups that performed virtually. We had a total of 8 groups that entered initially for in-person, and unfortunately, one of those had to change to virtual at the last second due to COVID restrictions at their school. But we were able to proceed with the competition. We cleared the stands at the end of the first in-person session. We had an award ceremony prior to that for those groups, and of course had our virtual award ceremony prior to the beginning of that. I should probably go back and stress the fact that we, at the beginning, did the live stream of all of the virtual groups initially. And we had sent out the videos to our adjudicators prior to the event to allow them to have an initial read, but then offered an opportunity for them to view them in real time and to fill out their judges' sheets at that point. We actually set that up in our auditorium to allow them to watch all of the virtual groups so that they would have better video, better sound, all of that for each of those groups. We then had the award ceremony for that group and then began our in-person groups where we offered a standstill division, we offered festival divisions, and we also offered competitive marching band divisions. We did clear the stands after the small group, as I mentioned. We took some time to sanitize and to regroup for everything. And then we allowed our large groups to enter and had our second session. How we accommodated some of the other financial obstacles for this, we did a fully virtual program, which we provided a QR code to all of our fans that came in. We did slash our prices to $5, which allowed them not only to have access to watching the live performers, they did have access to a QR code for the live stream, as well as a QR code for our virtual program so that they had access to that automatically. We did have a limited judging panel. We utilized 4 judges. We did a music performance, visual effect, and music effect. We did not offer the color guard and percussion captions for this particular competition. And we didn't have virtual groups competing against the in-person groups. The way we did it, if they were in the virtual classes, they were only up against other groups that were competing virtually. If they were competing in person, our small group bands were only up against other small group bands. And our large group bands were only up against those. We did not try to determine an overall champion for the event. We just did it strictly within those sessions. Trying to think what else. As far as financial, in case you're wondering how we did with that, we did actually come out in the green. After we paid our judges, we actually paid $750 to have it live streamed by Box 5 Productions. And actually, our contest is still available on their site if you would like to see how that went and how that might be ran. For the live stream, we actually did not charge, but offered an opportunity for them to provide donations just for the actual competition itself to a PayPal account. And we streamed that throughout the competition as well as presenting our sponsors. I will say that our sponsors were very pleased because they actually probably got the most coverage that they've ever gotten in a band competition before, because in between each of our groups, they were actually seeing all of those advertisements, each time. We did have our adjudicators offer a clinic. We initially planned for that to be via Google Meet for the safety of the judges, but all of them agreed that they wanted to do it in person. And so both our competition and the Barron County competition offered an immediate clinic right after. So instead of the traditional 15-minute block, we offered a 30-minute block for our in-person groups. And the judges actually came down to the field and spoke with the students directly about their performance in real time as soon as that was finished. And I think Tim and Pauletta will agree that was a very positive experience, and actually one of the biggest positive comments that I've gotten back from all of the participants that were in that. So unfortunately, I did have several things I was going to share with you today that I was going to bring up to show some of the different things that we did in order to make a hybrid situation possible. But since I wasn't able to be in the actual Zoom meeting, of course, I'm not able to share my screen and do some of the things of that nature, but I'll be happy to share that with anyone that would like to see. But for us, it did end up being a positive experience, both from a competition standpoint, participating, and also from a contest host perspective. We were able to do the things that were necessary to make the event successful. And it became more about celebrating all of the wonderful things that directors have done to keep the activity going this fall versus trying to make it a money-making event for our group. And luckily, our boosters and students and staff embraced that concept. And that's what we went with in trying to make it all possible. So I wanted to take a moment if anybody had any questions about any of our experiences or about our contest or any comments. Of course, we're always open to feedback as well. I think Tim and Pauletta could also give some insight on our contest.
Yeah, I will have to say, as one of the judges, I think it was a positive experience for everybody involved. Of course, Scott, you're very well organized, and that was a key into making this happen. And while I think about it, knowing how organized you are, I would like to put you on our task force that we created before you got online here for addressing a plan B if we have to go virtual or a hybrid system for next year if KMEA sponsors such events. So if you're okay with that, I'm going to put you on that list as well.
Love to do that.
Okay. Paula, do you have something you wanted to add?
I thought it was a great day, just for everybody, just to see kids out there performing again. And it was awesome. For myself personally, I mean, it was that vitamin B12 shot that I needed, so I just can imagine how the kids felt, and I think that the work that you did to make this happen was incredible for, not just your group, but all the groups.
I attended the show, and I know I can
that
speak.
for my students, it was not as hard as you would think to motivate them to participate virtually. They were just happy that they were getting to perform. And for this, it actually ended up being a fairly, as normal as you can be in 2020, a normal season for them, in that we were able to participate and get feedback from week to week. And for them, that was enough. They didn't need all the trophies, and they didn't need a lot of the other expenses, which that's something else I might add. We did kind of cut some cost on. We did plaques for each of the placements. We actually did certificates for a lot of the caption awards, and the directors seemed fine with that. I think they were just happy to have an event and understood the fact that in order to do that, we had to do a lot of cost-saving measures in order to ensure that we could have the adjudicators, in order to ensure that we could do all the other things that we needed to do to live stream the event. And so, with that, it became more about celebrating the different ways in which directors were able to go forward, because we saw lots of different types of performances throughout the day, and all of those were great. So I was really pleased with it. Our parents had a great experience with it, and we're really happy that we did it, and agree that if we're in a similar situation next year, we would like to go forward yet again, whether that be through KMEA or whether that be through being an independent competition like we were this year. But I will say that I was very happy to hear a lot of the conversation among the Marching Band Council about the possibility of KMEA also staking a claim in that for next year, because I do feel like you would get quite a bit of participation. And I think the fact that KMEA is involved would also encourage other groups that are able to safely go forward to do so.
Thank you, Scott. Really appreciate your input. Anybody else have questions for Scott or anything they would like to say?
I just wanted to say we attended Scott's event, and I know that my students and my parents are forever grateful for you guys being brave enough to and taking the time and energy and risk to do everything that you did to provide that performance opportunity. And it was really well ran, and it was just a really great day to have that opportunity and that outlet. And I just, I'm forever grateful. My students are, my parents are. Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming. And, we really enjoyed being able to do it. And like I said, are ready to do it again if needed next year.
Well, as I said, Scott, I've already put you down on our task force list to help us with a plan B for next season. So just count on getting an email about another meeting, okay?
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak with you today. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Scott. Anybody else have anything else in regards to what's happened with our summit today? All right. If there are no other comments or input from anybody, do we need an adjournment for this, a motion? No. We be done then, right? Patrick, are you still on here?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Are you basting a turkey? What in the world are you doing?
Yes, I was basting a turkey.
You're having Thanksgiving today?
Yes, we're actually having it with some people in hopes that everything goes well this week and I can maybe have it with my parents at the end of next week.
Gotcha.
So,
It's been entertaining to watch you move around your house and cook and do exercises, and it's been entertaining.
did you catch the calisthenics part of that? Okay.
Yeah, I got it all. We got it all. All right. If there is nothing else, last chance for comments. Hearing none, thank you all so much for helping us out. And we look forward to getting together with the task force and seeing all of us together again in February. Thanks so much. Happy Thanksgiving and happy holidays.